Welcome to Reputation Revolution. This is the podcast where we help individuals like you to establish your voice in the marketplace, enhance the credibility of that voice, extend the reach of your story and your message, and finally, extract value from your efforts in building a meaningful personal brand that's both recognized and respected. Now, on with the show.
We are live here with Reputation Revolution, the show all about personal brand impact. My name is Trevor Young. This is episode 262, and with me is Brendan Keogh. Greetings, Brendan.
Trevor, listeners.
So today we're going to be chatting all about the interview that I put up this week. If you're listening to this live, if we put it up this week on the Reputation Revolution podcast. If you're listening to this when this will become a podcast next week, it's a previous episode of an interview I did with Joanna Penn, aka the Creative Penn. I've been really keen to chat with Joanna, and for good reason. It was a ripper conversation.
Absolutely, it's quite inspiring actually, and you know, she's hit so many of the buttons that thought leaders really want to get to. You know, she's at a level of creating, you know, being so self-sufficient in her income and her choices, and following her interests. There's so much to unpack.
So just a quick recap on the discussion. Well, on Joanna anyway. Her, if you check her out at the Creative Penn, that is her website, her YouTube channel, her long-running podcast, which we'll get into that. And it's Penn because that is her name. And she's also JF Penn is her fiction writer. So she's a fiction writer, and she's done, I think she said 19 books as JF Penn in fiction. And then she's done with updated versions and everything, but kind of, I think, something like 21 nonfiction, but some of those have been, you know, redone and reissued, etc. And what Joanna's business is, take aside from the fact that she does fiction and she's a bona fide best-selling fiction author, USA Today, New York Times best-selling author, which is an amazing feat in itself. But the other side of it is her personal brand, where she helps other writers become authorpreneurs, or I called it authorpreneurs. She didn't like that phrase.
I liked it, right?
Author entrepreneurs, and building a business around their writing. So it's one thing to be a writer, whether it's a fiction or a non-fiction. It's another thing to build a long-term sustainable business around that. So it all comes off the back of a personal brand, whether that's a pseudonym or not. And Joanna has done all the things that on this show we talk about. She's done it all. And we'll unpack that, because I think there's some great stuff to chat about. But off the top of the head, Brendan, what was your key takeaway from my chat with Joanna?
Creativity, you know, and obviously it's built into her brand name, but just that creative essence and how she structures her work day for maximum creativity. The poster on the wall, measure your life by what you create. Yeah, a bit better than the one I have, which is failure. You know, and it could be that the purpose of your life is to serve as a warning to others. So yeah, I prefer her one actually. And you know, are you excited by what you're doing? Yeah, just asking yourself that question. And you know, that I just loved hearing how she gets bored easily. You know, so that she's a person after my own heart straight off the bat. But you got to find the thing that gives you energy. And follow your passions and energy, and weave it into your work.
And I often talk about, we've spoken before about being an expert versus a thought leader, and an expert has deep domain expertise and teaches and educates and you know, can basically build off a business off their back of their expertise. But that's what they become known for, and they become quite niche, or they stay in their lanes. And thought leaders tend to, you know, they push boundaries, they push, you know, they carve out an intellectual territory for themselves. They They change the way people think about topics and issues. They challenge people's thinking. They inspire them to think differently and bigger and all of that sort of stuff. And Joanna is a complete hybrid because she's got so much domain expertise around independent, let's call it writing and independent publishing, and in that space. And she's very much a thought leader in that as well, particularly around the future of writing and publishing. And we're talking AI and Web3 and NFTs and all the things, all the publishing trends as well.
I think her willingness to let go of a few listeners, because she'll get bored. She nearly quit. She nearly stopped it. So if she just kept doing the same thing just to please the diehards, then you won't do it at all. There's that chance you just stop. So it's so important for creators to keep an interest. I know in the interview you talked about niching versus going wide, and what's the focus. I loved your take on that. That you do your marketing as a niche, but in terms of your interest, you can sort of keep it broad and as long as in a perfect world you're tying it back in. It's part of your story. It's got to relate somehow. But in that sense, don't you're always thinking about your audience, but they're watching and learning from you and listening to you and coming along for the ride, because a big part of her thing is focus on what you love to read. What do you love to read normally? Try and bring that into your work. Bring your passion and energy into your work. So if you're doing that, people will be drawn to that, and they'll be learning along the way, probably areas that they're being challenged that they wouldn't have even thought about being interested in. A lot of her, I'm a writer, I'm an artist. What do I need to do X, Y, Z for? So, if you can lead the way, but she should always return to the evergreen topics to maintain that strong link, but to be able to pepper that with really things that really excite her. That's the key. I just love that story that, she only quit. She only stopped.
Yeah, and the evergreen topics, what you're talking about is a lot more of the utility content. So we talk about utility content often, and we talk about leadership content, and so a lot of her content is leadership stuff. But the evergreen and the utility is the helpful and useful, and I think she combines them really well for great effect. And she is very much on the, we also talk about human content, and she does bring people along for the journey of her professional creative life as well. So she does that in her podcast. So let's unpack her podcast a bit, because it's very long running. I think she said 688 episodes. I mean, that's a mountain. That's a body of work. 14 years, I think she's been going for, and 688 episodes, and it's evolved along the way, like all shows do. And she's now turned it, and when it's a show, it really is a show. I urge people to check out the Creative Penn if you're interested in writing and publishing and living a creative life and building your business around your creativity. Definitely listen to the Creative Penn podcast. But even if you're interested in podcasting and you just want a different flavor, because if you're going to be a podcaster, you'll probably hopefully listen to other podcasts to get some inspiration, see what's going on out there. But I love the way that she packages her show, because it starts off with she talks about what she's been doing, and a lot of that is professionally, but it does dovetail into a bit of personal life as well. And she's only been doing that for 5 years, and it was because some of the listeners wanted to listen and hear about her progress and what she was doing. And because she's a writer as well, that makes kind of sense to do. And then she goes into some news, publishing news, indie news, AI news, all the things that she talks about. And clearly she's a great curator of news, whether she shares that on social media or doing it via the podcast. And then she gets into an interview. So it's a really good show. And as she said, some people will probably listen to some parts of it and maybe not others, but it's the full package.
And I think it's such a good lesson for podcasters, that if you're doing particularly most of interview format, you get a bit hung up thinking that people are just there to listen to the guest. but they want to listen to you. They're tuning into your show to listen to get your insights. And as you said, it was her audience who said, "Hey, can you tell us a bit more about what you're doing?" So that's the most important part of her show now, that introduction where she gives that overview, what she's doing, as you say, a bit of news or what have you. And often people will just hear that bit. They just tune in for that bit, what she's up to.
Yeah,
so I think that's a really good lesson.
Yeah, and look, it's working. Yes, there's a body of work, but clearly she's continuing to build this audience. Some long-time listeners. I've listened to her for a long time, and of course, with podcasting, you're always getting new listeners in as well. But it's a top 1% global podcast, and what that means is that after I think as it drops, something like if you get 10,000 downloads straight away, like that's your quick download count. That's what she gets. So that counts towards being one of the most popular in the world. And then eventually, I think the stats are her, because people listen to it at different times. They don't all jump on straight away. And most episodes get between 15 and 25,000 downloads. So clearly she's got a great immediate following, and then there's residual listens up to 25,000 an episode. And that's a big audience. And of course you get an email if you subscribe on that side of things. She's got Patreon, which is one of the ways that's, people pay a small amount of money per month to support the show, and they get a little bit of bonus content, Q&As and stuff that non-subscribers don't, or non-patrons don't get. So and she gets the show sponsored because it's it's a solid listenership and a very dedicated one. And she just doesn't drop ads in there, but she has sponsors of products she uses and believes in.
Yeah. Again, lots of stuff. She had some great advice about advertising, and some thoughts on making sure you're getting that. I forget the term, but a significant listenership, so you get past the halfway point where the ad would be placed, generally. So that was great. I did love. Forgive me if I'm a bit off topic, but I loved her balance of, while she's a lifelong learner, obviously, and just loves, eats up AI and all of these new activities, and loves, learns new tools, etc. But she keeps her platforms fairly consistent over the years. So I think that's a good balance. That it's so overwhelming, especially if you're starting out. There's so many tools, the platforms, and then the other tools. So if you can minimize some of that noise and have consistent platforms, that frees you up to learn the new tools that might improve productivity or efficiency or what have you. So I thought that was a little good, interesting thing. So I don't know if you've got any take on that.
Yeah, you're right, because I said she's changed a lot. She said, well, I haven't changed it. And what I was saying is she's changed with her content and stuff, but she was just saying how her channels and what she's still a podcaster, and that's her number one thing. She doesn't blog per se. Occasionally she'll put up an article, but her blog now is almost a content hub and houses the podcast. Whereas she used to earlier days, be a regular blogger. But I still think that's regular blogging if you're putting a podcast on. I mean, a blog post is a video, a podcast, or whatever it is you want it to be.
Show notes.
So you've always got to have that content hub in your website anyway, I believe. And now she's got a really good YouTube channel, and she used to have all the like I do with mine, with this podcast, put them up on YouTube, the video of it. She stopped doing the visual video and has been putting audio videos up, if that makes sense. It's the podcast without any visuals, if you can imagine that. But now, just in recent weeks, really, YouTube has got a podcast functionality, and so she's wrapped with that because she's got a good following and people on YouTube, and people do listen to podcasts on YouTube. So I guess because it's an app and it's just their favorite, once they're in the app, they don't want to move to other apps to listen to podcasts. So that's a big win as well. So I'd expect her listenership to probably grow out of that. And she's pretty active on Twitter. That's still her social media channel of choice. And
the video aspect where she talked about, that was interesting, where she as you say, didn't do a lot of that, videos because it took too long and what have you, and she was comfortable with the plot, just this traditional podcast. But she will be taking on more video, and so that, so she's not set in the way. She's adapting and changing. But one thing that stuck out that is a consistent theme throughout our chats, where she talked about, getting started was the most important thing. She wouldn't be where she is 15 years later with the empire she's built without those early videos that she keeps up, or the first podcast interview where she had the recorder to the landline, the poor quality. She keeps it up there, and it's almost like a reminder of where she's come from, and I think it was such a great lesson for people. We all want to hit the ground running and be at the top, but these are it's part of your story too, and part of your journey. And think about, as you do, if you're going to want to get started, think about 5-10 years down the track, looking back and laughing about it as she was. Look what I did when I started. Look how embarrassing I was, or I didn't quite get it right. Again, just get it started, and because otherwise she wouldn't be where she is. So just another reinforcement of that massive, biggest hurdle for most people of getting started and not being perfect straight away.
Yeah, it's a good point you make, Brendan. And and there's a lot of YouTubers who do that with their early videos. They leave them up because that's where they've come from. And it just shows, and the thing is, if you look at some great YouTubers, for example, or listen to a great podcaster and listen to their early stuff, it's never going to be as good as it is after hundreds of episodes, or hundreds of videos. It's just not. So it's a crucial point she made about getting started, getting going, and the tools and the tech change. And you can, when she started, there was not the tools and the tech that there is today. So it's actually better to start today because you've got better infrastructure, tech and publishing platforms and infrastructure around you to make it happen. So you imagine the people doing stuff in the early days. I had an early podcast. I reckon it was around 2009, maybe 2010. And I can't even remember how I got it up, because how we got it up into the airwaves and onto the internets, because it was a lot clunkier in those days. But you still find a way, don't you?
Absolutely. No, it's inspirational. I loved her talking about, you asking her about how she plans things, and the phrase of plan lightly, I think was brilliant. And then I think it's such a great way to think about, because often the best laid plans go out the window when things come up. Plan lightly, have an idea, but be nimble, be able to move, don't be afraid to put things on hold or on ice, or because as other projects come up. So I thought the way she talked about, planning and then structuring her day for maximum creativity, setting aside her creative time in the morning. I mean, it's just a dream come true to be thinking about writing and as your key component of what you do, for someone like me. So just to be able to, structure that morning as creative time. I know she gets up early. That's something I aspire to do one day, but I think that's a great model to, in terms of, so there's just great lessons for creatives on how to structure your day and how to plan as well.
Habits, implementing habits that work for you and your rhythm and, your day-to-day life. And, of course you can always change your habits, but it's good to get them in the first place. And that's how she gets so much stuff done, and which is fantastic. So I do urge people to check out episode 261 of the podcast with Joanna Penn, and just get a really good feel for the types. It was just really a meaty talk, and the sorts of things she does. But just recapping, she's got the creative pen side of the business, the JF Penn side, which is the fiction writer, but in the nonfiction, and it's kind of, she's an educator, isn't she? She's a thought leader and an educator, and she's got courses, and she publishes nonfiction books that help writers get published and publish their own work, and the whole independent publishing scene, educating them on that, even being a healthy writer, and brings health into being a full-time writer as well. So, all the things that she knows her audience struggles with, and she goes through it as well because she is, in quotes, eating her own dog food. She's going through this process all the time, and then she writes about it and puts it out there. So having courses, and she's a speaker as well. Not that she does too many speaking engagements these days. I think she's probably judicious with them and has a bit of criteria. But because she's built the brand, she gets asked to speak at specific conferences. So again, that's social proof of her building a credible, professional, personal brand. So multiple streams of income, a lot of residual income from her back catalogue of books. And of course, she's got the courses and the sponsorships of the that pay for the podcasts and Patreon, and so multiple streams of income, which is a portfolio life she's got going.
An entrepreneur, was she was really particular about talking about that you have, especially for writers, being an entrepreneur, doing it all. But you have to learn and be self-sufficient with a lot of this stuff. So that's how you make money. If you can go into traditional way of a publisher, etc., but it's harder and you're under more constraints. So to be free, she's taking the time to learn the things along the way. I think the point around she made, learn things at the right time. Don't charge ahead and nut out Facebook ads when you haven't finished your book. So be focused, just one step at a time. Don't get ahead, because as she said, it'll change. There's no doubt they'll change something about something related to it. So focus on what's right in front of you. So I guess that's that prioritizing, and that also helps you to not be overwhelmed by all the things you need to do. Yeah. Step at a time. So I really like that simplicity of her approach with that. And, get to a point where you can pick and choose the speaking gigs based on, it's a bit cold there. Oh, no, I'll go to Spain instead. I'll take up that speaking gig. So, that's a wonderful place to be. For an introvert, as she said, it's not her favorite thing to do. So she is not in a hurry to do that. She doesn't do a lot of live video for that same reason. So, there's just so many great lessons on how to structure your creative life. It's just inspiring to see people really being so successful with it,
and marrying the business side with the creative side. I think a lot of creatives would struggle with that. Maybe there's some business. Well, it's the other side around too. Some people are entrepreneurial and they need to create content and be out there on social and stuff, and that's the creative side. And entrepreneurs need to have a creative side, and creatives need a entrepreneurial side. So you got to learn both ways. So
and she did morning for creative activity, and then afternoon for the kind of marketing and more business
side of things. Awesome, mate. Well, Brendan, thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you in a fortnight's time to riff on another topic. And,
it's been a pleasure, Trev.
And we'll and again, urging people to go and check out Joanna Penn at thecreativepenn, PENN.com. See you next time.
Take care.
The reputation economy is here. The world today needs more genuine, credible experts and leaders to stand up and share their experience, their wisdom, their stories and ideas. Are you in?